So I have told this story many times in my life, but I've never shared it with the world in this way. And I want to share this story because I really feel that it can provide some insight and value to somebody else who is going through something similar, who has been in a dark place, who has struggled with chronic pain or anxiety or illness and suicidal ideation in the way that I did, and hopefully realize that there's hope, because there has been times where I was ready to throw in the towel when the pain and the darkness was too much to handle. But now I am living a life that is so beautiful, that is so fulfilling, that is so meaningful, full of so much connection. I'm married to a beautiful woman. I have a business that fulfills me, where I get to serve other people. I'm healthier than ever, and I've overcome so many of the challenges that I thought I would never overcome. So I thought sharing this story would be of value to someone out there. So if you don't know me yet, my name is Josh Rose. I am a transformational coach, trauma-informed facilitator, breathwork practitioner, and I've been coaching individuals as a health coach, as a facilitator for about 8 years now. And over the years, I have worn many hats, from being a personal trainer to a yoga instructor to a health coach to a business coach to a breathwork facilitator, plant medicine facilitator. And at the core of it all is really helping people remember who the fuck they are and learn how to live a prosperous, happy, and healthy life. And often in that journey of getting to that destination of being happy and healthy and free requires us to navigate a lot of struggle, challenge, difficulty, and pain. And I can look back at my journey and realize that every single part of my pain, there was purpose in it. Every part of the journey was a part of my life curriculum that I needed to go through, because had I not gone through that, I would not be able to relate to other people in the way that I am, and I wouldn't have been able to uncover the purpose that I am now living out in my life. So I'm going to take you back to when I was 16 years old. I was very overweight. All I did was play video games for about 12 hours a day. My greatest accomplishment at that time was being the number one person in the world on Call of Duty Zombies. And I was a part of this clan where we made YouTube videos and montages, and it was my form of escape from the world, because this was around like middle school, high school time, and it was a very brutal time for me. And I started to isolate myself from the world because I started to get bullied for being overweight. I was pushed into lockers. I had sodas dumped on my head. People would make fun of me and mock me for my weight. And because of that, I just isolated myself from school. I isolated myself from my friends because I felt a lot of shame around it. And I played baseball, basketball, sports for about 8 years. I gave all that up because in video games, I was able to create my own identity. People couldn't see me. They didn't know who I was. So I found my escape in there. And as I started to play more and more video games, I started to get bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where I remember one doctor visit. He told me, "You've gained 14 pounds in this 1 month. If you keep this going, you're going to be extremely morbidly obese and develop a lot of health conditions." In that moment, I saw a life that I didn't want to live. And that's when I decided to make a change. So at that moment, I literally stopped playing video games that day. And I started working out ruthlessly. I got P90X. I started dieting in a very unhealthy way. So I was working out twice a day. I was eating virtually nothing, probably a chicken breast and some yogurt every single day. And within one summer, I lost 40 pounds. And I came back to school that next year and nobody recognized me. Nobody knew who I was. It was actually funny. And when they saw me, they were like, "Wow, what happened to you?" And it wasn't like this sense of admiration. It was, "Are you okay? Are you sick? Are you anorexic?" And then people started making fun of me for being skinny. And at that moment, I felt this deep sense of frustration because if I was made fun of for being for being fat, and I'm also being made fun of for being skinny, maybe I need to get jacked. I saw all the people who are fit and jacked and ripped getting so much love and validation from other people. So I started hitting the gym and I started dieting with the purpose of building muscle. And this was about probably a 3-year journey of me becoming obsessed with fitness. Nothing else mattered in the world. When I was in school, I was thinking about the gym. I was literally going to parties in high school with my Tupperware of chicken. And I was counting every macro to the T. And while on the outside, I had a six-pack and I looked great, while on the outside, I was 135 pounds of pure muscle and deadlifting 430 pounds, squatting 420 pounds, benching 315, training to compete. And I was ready to break world records based on my age and weight group. But I deeply hated myself. And what most people did not see, I don't know if anybody ever knew, but I was suffering with severe eating disorders and body image dysmorphia, where probably 3-4 nights a week, I would binge on tens of thousands of calories of food. And late at night, because my diet was so restrictive, I would get these cravings because I loved food and I had such a sweet tooth, and I would drive to the 7-Eleven closest to me and I would get a Ben & Jerry's pint of ice cream. I would get 2 apple fritters and a box of cereal. And I would binge on that. And for the first couple months, I would just binge and nothing else. And I started to feel so sick at one point that I made myself throw up. And at that moment, I made myself throw up and I felt better afterwards. And I realized, oh, I can eat more now. And that started a vicious cycle of binging and purging for years. And nobody knew. Nobody knew that I was going through this. Nobody knew that inside I absolutely hated who I was. My whole identity was based on what I looked like, how fit I was, how ripped my abs were. And I was judging every single aspect of who I was. I would look at myself in the mirror and go, oh, my nipples are too puffy. I literally would wear Under Armour shirts so my nipples wouldn't poke out of my shirt. If I was at the beach, I wouldn't take my shirt off. Even though I had a six-pack, I wouldn't take my shirt off. I would avoid situations where people were taking off their shirts because I was so ashamed of how I looked. And in my mind, I just needed to keep working harder and harder. And once I looked a certain way, then I would finally love myself. But that point never came. And I remember the last time that I purged, it was on my high school graduation day. During lunch at school, I went home, I binged on, I think, 2 pints of ice cream. I made myself throw up in the bathtub. And when I was looking at myself in the mirror, washing my face, I saw this vomit coming down my mouth. And at that moment, I decided that I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. Similar to being overweight, I had this vision of my life. I'm like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So at that moment, I devoted to stopping. And I started to heal my relationship with food. And I would still binge sometimes, but I wouldn't let myself make myself throw up. And graduated from high school, and I keep working out, I keep training to compete in powerlifting. And my whole vision for my life is being a personal trainer, being a bodybuilder, and being a competitive powerlifter. And during this time at school, I was studying exercise science because that was my whole life. And I started going to music festivals. And at these music festivals, I started to feel a sense of belonging. There was other people who could be seen as the misfits of society and the outcasts, and a bunch of weird people where there was just a sense of love and connection and community and belonging. And I started to find myself there beyond my body. But very heavily, my identity was wrapped around my body. I would not dance. I was that person at the festival, just kind of looking around, like, are people judging me? I don't want to dance. and I was very shy and insecure. And there was this one festival that was a Dreamscape festival in Maryland, where I had my first LSD experience. This was the first psychedelic that I had ever taken. And during this LSD experience, I completely lost my mind. I remember there was this one moment where we were standing at the stage and I was feeling so weird and so insecure, and I thought everyone was looking at me. And my friend Greg comes over to me and he grabs me by the shoulders and goes, "Josh, you try to be this big macho man on the outside, but inside you're just a scared little child." And at that moment, my psyche just fractured into two. And it felt like for the first time in my life, there was this mirror that was turned on me and I saw myself for who I was being. And I started spiraling. This is what people would call a bad trip. I started spiraling into my mind and I started to get so lost and disconnected from reality. I started to forget who I was. I started to forget why I was here at the festival. I started to forget who my family was. I remembered that I loved working out, but why do I love working out? And then that just started to fade. It was almost like trying to remember a dream. The more you try to remember, the farther the dream goes. That's how it felt about every aspect of my personality. And I made a very bad mistake, but I went back to the campsite because I wanted to try to find some comfort. And I remembered that this girl had sold us a edible cookie earlier in the day. And when she sold us this cookie, she said, "Do not eat this whole thing. There is 3 potent doses of THC in here, so do not eat the whole thing. Split it into 3s. So I thought maybe it would help me. And now I have learned that that is the worst thing that you can do, combine THC with psychedelics, especially if you're having a challenging experience, because it will amplify it. But I took one bite, and because of my history with emotional eating, it brought me some comfort, so I kept eating and I ate the whole thing. And then from there onward, I continued to spiral deep into this dark hole of nothingness. I felt like I was in this void where I completely forgot who I was. And in that moment, I thought I was fucked up for life. I was going to be stuck here. This was my new reality. I was going to be stuck in this schizophrenic, psychotic state. And I started having these visions of me spending the rest of my life in a psych ward. And most of the time when people have these ego death experiences, there is some form of revelation or remembrance of who they are. And I didn't have that. I was stuck. I woke up the next day at the festival and I was just so far gone. I felt like I was a million miles inside of my own mind. And I went home that day and my passion for working out was gone. My whole career path was just gone. And I was basically suicidal for 6 months. I couldn't get out of bed. I was chronically paranoid. I was hearing things. I was seeing things. Every time I would go to sleep, there was I would have images of this fiery, hellish torture and murder and like the world burning inside of me. And I couldn't sleep because of it. So that just started to make things worse and worse. And I stopped eating, and then I started to develop stomach problems, and anything that I would eat would trigger this flare in my stomach and my whole body would shut down. And then I started to get this joint pain all throughout my body, where my body was aching in pain and inflammation constantly. So eventually I end up going to doctors. I get diagnosed with fibromyalgia and IBS. I go to a psychiatrist and they diagnose me with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And they put me on medications. And this is also during the time that I started to find these YouTube videos about spiritual awakenings. So during this time, I had no friends. I had no support systems. I was living in my grandma's basement. And I started to find mentors online. So I started watching these YouTube videos, Ralph Smart, Infinite Waters, Diving Deep once again, Aubrey Marcus, Teal Swan, all these spiritual teachers online. And they started talking about this concept of a spiritual awakening. And there was a thought in me like, oh, like all of these symptoms of a spiritual awakening are exactly what I'm going through. And it's the same thing as the symptoms of anxiety and depression. Maybe I'm having a spiritual awakening, or maybe I'm just fucking crazy. I didn't know. All I knew was I needed to find an answer. So there was one part of me that knew maybe I was going through a spiritual awakening journey, but this was all new to me. All I knew my entire life was if you're depressed, you should be on medications. So I end up going on the medications, and 2 weeks later, I'm just numb. And I am not feeling good. I'm not feeling the negative emotions, but I'm also can't feel positive emotions, and I'm just numb. And maybe that helped me get to a state of neutrality for me to realize what the next step was. But 2 weeks into taking these medications, there was this moment where this voice inside of me said, you need to face the darkness inside of you. You can't be on these medications forever. And at that moment, I knew, similar to the purging, similar to being overweight, that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being on medications, because I've seen my family do it, be on medications for 50, 60, 70 years. I've seen the rest of society do that. I didn't want to be one of those people. I wanted to heal. I wanted to overcome this. So what did I do? I threw out the medications, and at that time, I started finding videos on plant medicines. Aubrey Marcus was a big part of my journey because he was talking about these psilocybin experiences and ayahuasca experiences, and I thought, maybe this could be an answer for me. And little did I know that I would be working very intimately with these medicines many years later. But this voice in me said, have a psilocybin journey. And the next day, my friend invited me to have a psilocybin ceremony with him. And during this experience, I'm going to make another video on what exactly happened in this experience. But to keep it short, during this experience, I was laying outside in my grandparents' backyard, and I was staring up into space. It was a night sky, and there was this branch right above me. And I was staring at the branch, and it was breathing, and there was life to it. And I was so enamored and mesmerized by it. And then everything else in the universe started to disappear except for that branch. It was just my consciousness and that branch. And that branch started to move up into space, and it took my consciousness with it. And then I was above Earth, thousands of miles in the sky, looking down on Earth. Without a body, it was just my soul, and there was 2 angels there with me. And these 2 angels were asking me what my purpose was on Earth. And in that moment, I knew. It was this divine revelation of my soul remembering that not only did I choose to come to Earth, but I came to Earth with a purpose. And prior to that, I had absolutely no purpose. I had absolutely no clarity. I had no awareness that I had a soul or that I chose to come here. And at that moment, I knew. And then they cloaked me in a human body, and they asked, are you ready? And I said, yes. They sent me down, and I remembered being born. I viscerally remembered being born. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. I came out of my mother's womb as a baby crying, and I viscerally remembered all of the emotions. I remembered the hospital room. I remembered the doctors holding me and my mom holding me. And then from that moment on, I relived every memory. It's almost like I relived my entire lifetime up until that moment over again. And I had spent the next 4 to 5 hours processing and purging and crying and reliving every memory that had been suppressed or repressed inside of me. And when I came back to my body in this present moment, it's like I remembered who I was. That was the experience that broke me out of that psychotic state that that had happened 6 months prior due to the LSD experience. And the day after that, depression was gone. Anxiety was gone. The pain in my body was gone. The IBS was gone. Up until that moment, I had never eaten a fruit or a vegetable. Not an exaggeration. I was a very picky eater. It was a sense of part of the eating disorder and a sense of control. I had never eaten a fruit or a vegetable. All I wanted to eat was fruits and vegetables. That day, I became a vegan, no longer a vegan, but I was vegan for 3 to 4 years. Started juicing. I started eating all of these fruits and vegetables, eating the way that my body was asking to be eaten. Or not my body was asking to be eaten, my body wanted to eat. And I completely made a complete 180 shift in my life. I started waking up early. I started doing breath work. I started doing ice baths. I started meditating every day. And I started to take care of myself. And then a few months later, I had another mushroom experience. And obviously, when you have these experiences, when you come into this sense of purpose and presence, and you kind of rise up into the light, you're not going to stay there forever. Sometimes you experience that to realize what's possible, and life is not linear, it's more circular. So I went to the light and then I came back down to the darkness. A lot of that darkness and shadows started to come up again. A lot of the pain in my body started to return. A lot of the physical symptoms started to return. A lot of the self-hatred started to return. But it wasn't as bad as before. I had a new sense, a new perspective on it. I realized I can heal this. So I go into another mushroom ceremony. And during the ceremony, I close my eyes as we're coming up on the medicine. And there was this shadow inside of me, this like dark demon. It looked like a demon. And it scared the shit out of me. It almost looked like it was one of those creatures in Lord of the Rings. And I was terrified. I had no idea what this thing was. I thought there was a demon living inside of me. So I spent the next few hours avoiding it, running away from it, trying to make myself feel better. And as you may know or not know, in psychedelics, if you avoid the darkness, it's going to chase you. And not just in psychedelics or plant medicines, but in life. If you run away from your darkness, it's going to follow you. So it followed me, and I remembered why I did this and the work that I was doing. So I closed my eyes again to face what that was. And I saw it, and I felt it, and it was me. It wasn't a demon, it was me, it was my shadow. And this shadow had carried so much self-hatred, so much fear and anxiety and unworthiness and shame. And in that moment, I looked at it and I realized, oh, this is the shadow of all the pain that I had caused myself, all the ways I've shamed myself and have judged myself and have abandoned myself. That's that part of me. And I looked at it and I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for hurting you. I'm sorry for punishing you. I'm sorry for abandoning you. I'm sorry for criticizing you. You don't have to run anymore. I love you and I accept you. I opened my arms and it came in, and when I hugged it, that shadow merged into me, and I felt every single pain and shame and emotion that shadow was carrying. And I had spent the next few hours crying. Not just crying, but laughing. It was this process of feeling and experiencing every emotion that I had kept repressed in my body. And then I came back and I went to the mirror and I looked at myself and I saw my body for the first time in my life, not as me, but as a vehicle, as a temple, as a vessel for my soul to inhabit. I almost saw my body as a pet, like it was my responsibility to take care of this pet for the rest of my life. And I just started to hold myself and nurture myself and love myself. And I started to cry at how much I loved myself and feeling so much sorrow and asking forgiveness from my body for all the ways that I've hurt it and have shamed it. And at that time, I freed myself completely from my identity with my body. For the first time in my life, I looked at myself in the mirror and I loved myself. And since then, literally 6 years ago, I have not had one negative thought about my body. Since then, I have not binged or purged or have had any problem with food. Food and my body is something that I have a really positive relationship with now. And I give a lot of that credit to these experiences that I had with mushrooms. So moving forward in this story, I continue to do the work. I continue to show up for myself. And around that time, I also got certified as a personal trainer. And I started teaching group fitness classes, and I started personal training. 3 months later, I started to teach yoga because yoga started to call me deeply, even though I wasn't certified. 3 months after starting doing yoga, I was teaching it. And I was just fully immersed in this process of learning as much as I can about spirituality, about the human condition, about plant medicines, about mental health, about nutrition, about personal development. I was reading all these books. I was studying all these religions and philosophies that started to really create this sense of awe and wonder in life again. And over the next few years, I started sitting with ayahuasca and working with kambo and going to these community events and finding my tribe and finding my people. And here I am. Here I am 8 years later, happy as hell, healthy, free of pain, deeply connected to God, clear in my purpose of why I'm here on this planet, with close friendships that I hold so close to my heart, married to a beautiful woman, with such a positive relationship with myself. And that is the biggest thing that I got from this journey, is I got my relationship with myself back. That I know that no matter what I go through, that I got me. No matter what happens in my life, I got me. Because I love me, I trust me, I respect me. And throughout that journey, this is not to say that I'm not also human and don't experience the same similar depression and anxiety and challenging moments. I'm assuming I'm going to experience struggle and challenge for the rest of my life, but it's just that I experience it differently now. I experience it with a sense of openness and willingness, that I realize that any struggle or challenge that happens isn't happening to me, but is happening for me. That I can walk into the world with this sense of openness, like, bring it on, God. What do you have for me? What lessons do you have for me? What do you want me to do with my life? And here I am today as a trauma-informed plant medicine facilitator, combo practitioner, trauma-informed somatic breathwork practitioner, holding retreats and ceremonies and coaching and supporting other individuals in a similar process of going from shame and suffering and self-sabotage to self-love and self-mastery, and finding their connection to themselves and God again. So this story can go so much deeper, and I'm probably going to make more videos on the specific moments throughout this because I can go so much deeper, but I just wanted to get this story out there of the suffering that I have been through and the meaning that I have been able to find through my suffering. Because in this world of mental health, trauma is often looked at as something that's bad. When I tell this story to people, whether it be my story of eating disorders or my story of losing my mind and going into psychosis or any of the traumas that I've been through in my life, people say, I'm so sorry. And I appreciate that empathy, but I say, quite honestly, I'm not sorry that I went through that. I am grateful that I went through that, because had I not gone through that, I would not be the man that I am today. I would not be able to support people in the capacity that I do, because I wouldn't be able to relate to them. And I have helped facilitate dozens of plant medicine ceremonies. And I've seen and have witnessed people going through a similar process of losing their mind. And I can stand sturdy and strong in this knowing that if they're losing their mind, it's because they're finding their soul. And when we can understand that process, that we need to lose a part of ourselves, a part of us needs to die in order for the truth inside of us to be reborn, then we can look at life in a completely different lens. When you can realize that things don't happen to you, that they happen for you, then you can walk into the world with a sense of faith, with a strong heart, with an open mind, curious at what is out there, curious into what are the lessons that life is wanting to teach me through this experience. So if you are currently going through something similar, if you're going through depression or addiction or anxiety, or have been through trauma and are feeling so lost and disconnected from yourself or from life, then reach out. This is what I do. So if you're looking for some support, click in the link in the description and book a call with me. It's a free call, and it's just really a call to be of support to you and explore if I can support you in your journey moving forward. So this has been a 30-minute video. This has been it's been a process for me to just share this and integrate this, and I'm really excited to keep sharing more stories and keep sharing my journey and my process with you. So I hope if you stayed this long that you got some value and that this is of support to you and that there's some hope. If you're struggling, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So sending so much love to you, so much love, so many blessings, and we will talk soon. Peace.